Salam, Hasnain.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you very much for coming in today, for joining us on the podcast. I think to start off with, in terms of background and how we know each other, we met at a legendary Ramadan iftar. Takes place every year. Yeah. I don't know how you managed to get an invite one year.
Yeah.
And we ended up speaking, I think, the whole night pretty much.
That's right.
And before that, I had only ever, I guess, seen you on social media, had heard about you and your story as well. But I think we had quite a decent chat. I mean, we kept in touch since then.
Yeah.
Mainly football-related conversations.
Sure.
And usually when my team have just done one over on yours.
I'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, we can talk in a few years' time. But yeah, and I think with this conversation today, it's something that I've had on my mind for a while. And it just, I think I messaged you a few weeks ago and I said, if you're down, let's sit down. I think it would be your story as an individual, and I guess the journey that you've been on is inspiring. I know you don't like the kind of cliche terms, all that kind of stuff, but I thought it'd be a good place to at least start and have a conversation and just, I guess, see where it goes.
Sure.
So I guess as a starting place, I think the best way to kind of do this is just talk about your life, because you've had a very colourful and interesting life. You've got one or two more white hairs than myself, very barely. But I think there's so much to tell. So if we can jump in from like the work/business side, you were previously in the finance sector. What was that environment like, and what were you like as an individual back then?
Yeah, sure. Well, listen, firstly, thank you for inviting me and for the Muslim Vibe to give me this opportunity. You're right, I do find the word inspiring a little bit cliche, and I don't find my life to be inspiring, but if others see it that way, then, alhamdulillah, if they can benefit in any way from it, then so be it. Before I go into the kind of financial life, let's talk a little bit about this legendary barbecue, because
you can lead the conversation.
I'm going to say, I did get my kind of foot in the back door. I don't usually go every year, and I kind of knew a few people. You know it is, right?
Yeah.
And you're on the guest list. So
Hasib got in the same way.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
You got in the same
Maybe
way.
I need to speak to Syed and see, for the future, if my people don't come through, that I can get through his people. And it was nice to come along and see some of the brothers get together for iftar and stuff. And like you said, I met you there, and this is where it's kind of brought us to. So the eldest child in my family, being me, and my father being the eldest from his generation, there was always that kind of sense of responsibility, and that, you've got to kind of lead the way. And that was no different for my dad. And obviously there was no pressure on me. That's what I got told, but it was pressure from the beginning. And I was an average guy at school, kind of liked a few lessons, didn't like other lessons, and always hated maths. So I don't know about other people, but generally everyone in my kind of school weren't very good with numbers. So ending up in banking was a little bit of a coincidence. But I, being Pakistani, I often use this kind of gesture of, you either need to be a good cricketer, or you need to be a doctor, otherwise you failed as a Pakistani child. And so I failed even before I even got to uni. And usual, got a degree, and didn't really know what I wanted to do. And somebody kind of mentioned that you're very good with relationships management skills, and maybe at the time a lot of these banks were looking for people to kind of build relationships with people, especially in the community. And I started my career at HSBC, and I was there for a good, I think maybe 12, 13 years. And with any big organization, they give you opportunities to, move around after 2-3 years and develop and go into other departments. And so I was very lucky. I kind of covered off cash management and operational roles. I did Islamic finance, and I did private banking. I went out to the Middle East for a few years for the bank. And the banking world is interesting because, as you can imagine, working for a big corporate organization, it's all about generating revenue, bottom line,
all the things that I don't understand generally in life.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in most roles now, it's fundamentally about proving that, your head count, what do you bring in, what value do you bring in, especially in a bank, it's all about figures and sales. And I kind of became a slightly arrogant individual, and what was in it for me, and I would only talk to certain people if I felt that I could make money from you. And over that period, I sensed that it was kind of going against how I was brought up. And, but, I kind of ignored it because it was all about, trying to prove to, especially my father, that, I'm worthy, and that if I can make as much money as I possibly can, then that was the kind of definition of success at the time for me, was how much you had in your bank account, what car you drove, the usual kind of materialistic things you think that people judge you on success. And so, I wasn't a nice person, and I often got told by my mother as well that sometimes when I'm walking on the streets that I'd look at people like I'm about to eat them. I don't know what that meant, but it wasn't somebody that you would approach to come and say hi. That's for sure.
I get sorry to cut you off. I get this feeling like in that environment, and it's something that you mentioned to Hussam earlier, that you would size people up.
Yeah,
and it's very much that everyone around you is striving to have the nice car, wear the good watch, wear the best suit, and you judge people at a very superficial level.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, right, the bottom line in a bank is the dollars.
Yeah.
Right. How much? What's your value is dictated by the monetary side of things.
Right.
So it only makes sense, I think, that if you're that far into the deep end, that you would kind of become like that.
Well, it's your environment, right? And so if all you're ever being told is to try and bring in as much revenue in the shortest period of time, then it's all about, making sure that you're around those people that you feel are going to bring you that money, and anyone else is not really, important to you.
Yeah.
So your priorities change based on your environment that you're around. And so,
So can I ask, what was your mindset? So when your mum would say, for example, to you that you look like you're gonna eat, you want to eat the people when you're walking by, how did you take that?
Well, I was like, well, Mum, you don't realize I'm about to make another 50 grand bonus out of this guy. So it was not the best way to see things, but I didn't care. It was like, I'm bringing more money in for the bank, which fundamentally means bringing more money into my bank account. So I heard it, but did I really acknowledge and take it on board? No, far from it.
And then what changed?
Yeah, so look, I think what was the biggest sort of introduction to the change was, we were blessed with a child and born perfectly fine. And after a few months, for those who are old enough will remember, we had these webcams these big cameras that go on top of the monitor. And because we never used to have those kind of...
Too young.
Yeah, too young. Of course you are. Yeah, of course you are. And so my father and mother were abroad, and they kind of looked at our son, Rehan Abbas, and they said that he looks a little bit floppy. And I didn't want to laugh at my dad, but I was like, Dad, come on. He's only 3 months. Yeah. Give him a break. He's not going to start, running 100 meters right now.
Doing kick-ups.
Yeah. But, he's wiser, older, wisdom comes through. And he said, look, just go and get it checked. And so we went to our local hospital, and they were a little bit concerned with his motor skills, and they said, we're going to have to refer this. NHS, as you can imagine, they were always stretched. And so I kind of reached out to a professor at Harley Street. We went down there, and that day was probably the beginning of this change in my journey, because he sat there, and for a while he was just writing notes. And I remember clearly, because I was like, can you tell me what's going on? And this guy was just like literally making all these assessments, and I was very impatient. And then I kind of waited for him to finish, and he said that his opening line was, your son is not going to live for more than 2 years. And I was like, what? And so he then explained that if he does live any longer than 2 years, then he's going to be living in very difficult conditions. He'd probably need to have a pipe to be fed. He would be on a wheelchair, completely floppy, and his quality of life is going to be extremely challenging. And they said that really we recommend, imagine he's only like 4 months at this stage. So being told that your son, who was born perfectly fine, who is building a relationship and knows and engages with his parents and knows his surroundings, being told that he's going to live for no more than 2 years. And sorry,
up until that point, other than your dad on the webcam, you had no inclination.
No inclination. And, maybe the professor thought telling them straight up is better than just trying to build some kind of hope or whatever. And I kind of sat there frozen for a while. And then literally, it was like a click of a button. I just thought, okay, my whole purpose, my whole duty of life now, period, one thing is to just make sure that Rehan Abbas, our son, has the best quality of life that he can possibly have. And subconsciously, what that did is my priorities changed.
Yeah.
So thinking about someone as a client, trying to bring in more money, focusing purely on my job, wanting to bring in a bigger bonus than last year, that all kind of became secondary because this new purpose in my life came. And I didn't know how long this was going to go on for. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how the day-to-day battle will be. But knowing that this was my new kind of purpose. And Salim, I kid you not, it was literally, it weren't like I walked and pondered on it and I went for, got home and I thought about it. I had another 3 days. No, at that moment, it was just like, instant. A click of, instant. I was like, this is my purpose.
And what was that like? I mean, because I'm a dad as well, right? My daughter now, alhamdulillah, is 2.5 years, all in good health and everything. And I'm thinking when you mentioned, your son being 4 months old, I can remember my daughter at 4 months. And if I was to be told at that time that there was something wrong, it's almost unimaginable. How, and again, more so for the mothers than for the fathers.
Right.
Like how did your wife, how was that for her?
Yeah, it's a good question, Salim. And I think, to be honest, growing up, being the oldest of 4, I'd already had this built in me that, you've got to do this for your brother, you've got to do this for your sister, you've got to do this for your parents. And so I already had some kind of experience of my concern is not the first and fundamental point of, where I need to go to. It's the concern of others. So my wife, my parents, my siblings, I'd already been doing that in some ways. So, of course, I inside was destroyed. Mm-hmm. Of course, there was voices inside me saying, it's over. There's no point living. There's no point having a purpose in life. There's no point anything in life because your son is not going to be around in 2 years. So it's a question that I suppose I don't have the right. There's no right or wrong formula to how you deal with your adversities and death. But in mine, I'd already had a little bit of motion where I've experienced not worrying too much about me right now and focusing on others.
And if I remember correctly, I remember you the previous interview that you had done, you mentioned that even your father, your parents had lost their eldest child. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So, again, I think typically, in my family, I was never sort of had that kind of conversation with my father where he would say, I'm proud of you, give me a hug, high five, let's go and play some snooker, whatever the fathers. I never had that. And so I didn't realize until later on in life to find out that they had also lost their first child and realized why I was a spoiled brat. Because honestly, I was born and it was like, typically being a boy and being healthy, I just clicked a finger or, I'll just wail a bit and I got it. It was just, and so I thought, okay, let's keep this going until I think I was about 20 and my dad clipped me around the ear hole. I think it was a bit younger than that, but I don't think get away with this day and age. But yeah, so he had also experienced that. And I thought about reaching out to my dad to have that conversation, to say that when that was going on, did you know beforehand? Did it happen?
Did you have that conversation?
No.
Because I was going to say that the issue with all of this is that from our background, South Asian background, as you said, you don't get the pat around the shoulder from your dad. You don't have these intimate conversations.
Correct, yeah.
So then, what was at the time? You didn't know how long your son had left to live.
Yeah.
As you said, your focus was the quality of life. Right. What were the kind of conversations that took place in the household?
Yeah, you know what? It's sad to say, but there wasn't that many conversations. I was so busy day to day. I mean, just to give you a cycle, our son first went back to the local hospital, and basically his lung capacity to breathe was going to be his downfall. So during the day, I would see my son, his lungs were working faster than 200 meters sprinters running at the same time, just to try and breathe. and they would get a SATS machine in, they would get oxygen cylinders in, and they would calm his breathing. That process of seeing him go through that 3-4 times a day was unbearable.
So he was in hospital
He was
the
in
whole
hospital.
time?
Well, to begin with. And so by the time I got home, I was too drained to even have conversations with people to say, oh, this is what's happened. I mean, they were all concerned and they all wanted...
Did everyone know what the situation was?
Yeah, they knew what the situation was, but I think they were also a little bit skeptical. Like, how do we approach Hasnain? Is he okay? Does he want to have that conversation? Of course, my father and mother, they would always ask, and I would say, it's all good. It's all good, alhamdulillah. Because that I think I tried to not restrict them from having the conversation openly about it, but I just didn't have the energy to always come home every day and have that conversation. So we didn't really have that many conversations, and it wasn't like I was going gung ho. But all I used to focus on initially when he first went to hospital was to make sure, because my wife was there all the time, was to make sure that I was managing the consultants, that my wife was okay, that the facilities that were needed for our son were there. So we didn't really have that many conversations. After that, he eventually came home because they said with 6 months to go that his best surroundings is his room. He identifies it.
Yeah.
And, he may go anytime. And we can provide all the service, and they did. We'd get nurses that come every day. They were attracted to some fluorescent lights, so we'd all these tubes going around the room just because he was attracted to it. He loved watching Finding Nemo, for those who remember that Disney.
Well, it's not that old.
Oh, come on, man! You're saying you're about 12 years old earlier on. So we'd watch that all day, and he kind of was in the house, and that gave my parents a little bit more, I suppose, reassurance. Yeah. Of the fact that we can see how he is and stuff like that. But yeah, we became his own nurses or doctors until he one morning we woke up and he had peacefully passed away in our bed.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot, man.
Yeah.
And I feel like even you mentioned you were talking about your own kind of coping or how you dealt at the time. I feel like one thing that I've learned, at least from my own experience as well, and seen with people around, is that it can almost be a coping mechanism, right? Where your focus is so specifically, as you said, like, I'm just going to manage the consults, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Where you don't, and also it's like our cultural engineering, where we don't, as men, as South Asians, as I don't want to say as Muslims, because it's not a Muslim thing, but we don't delve into our emotions. We don't kind of explore that side. It's like, let's just shut that out. Like you said, let's be strong for everybody else. Yeah. But I can only imagine that must have taken a ridiculous toll internally. And something that you probably didn't even process at the time. No doubt, Salim. And look, I'll be honest, I'm sitting here today, and if I was to say to you that I've, looked into my emotions or dealt with them, as much as I'd like to, no, of course not. I'm far from it. Can I ask why not? Yeah, we need another whole podcast for that, I think, to be honest. But, I think it's an ongoing process. Firstly, it's about accepting that you need to maybe speak to someone, or you have a channel to release. So it's work in progress. Of course. But I and we're going to come on to other things, but I found also other ways to try and, release some of that. And so, yeah. And so then, chronologically, I guess, where did life take you from there? Yeah, so I got busy back with work, and I kind of... You were still working the same sector? Yeah, I was still working in the bank, and I kind of used work as an escape again. I don't think it was the best way to do things, but I didn't know anything else. Had your attitude at that point then shifted? Yeah, it was shifting. I wouldn't say it shifted completely. No, as in, what I mean is, did you go back to that kind of cold, hard, calculated Hasnain? No, not as much, because I'd also kind of moved a little bit in the banking. I worked in Islamic finance, and that was a slightly, I think, a little more value-based sort of environment, even though we were still working for a huge bank. But the environment that I was around and the boss that I had was, amazing. So that was, I again, God makes all these moves, but I think the timing for that was great, because it allowed me to kind of reflect a little bit more upon about what I've been through and where I'm kind of going. Can I also ask you one question at this point? I think when it comes to death and dealing with death, like you mentioned, the people that are closest to you, your friends, family, don't always know how to react, what to say, should I say anything? Like even when someone passed away, I'm like, I want to message a guy, but I know he's going to be inundated. I'm not expecting a response, but so I guess the question is for yourself at that time, what were you looking for from people around you? You know what I mean? I know it's a tough question, and it's different for everyone.
It's a very powerful question, and I think it's a question it's not really brought up that much, if I be honest, but it needs to be brought up.
Yeah.
So the obvious thing I needed was space. I didn't want anyone to say I'm sorry. I didn't want anyone to reach out to me and say,
if you need anything, I'm here.
I just wanted space.
Yeah.
But such is our culture and our community.
That's the last thing you get.
And to be honest, I was having this conversation with my father a few weeks ago. The first generation that came here, when something went wrong, especially when it came to death, everyone got together to support the funeral arrangements. And I know my father personally helped towards some families who didn't have enough money for them. So if you hadn't reached out, you were blamed that where were you? And that's fine. But I think as second, third generation sort of, and your families grow, and we understand, and, especially when it comes to mental health and giving people time or whatever, what I really wanted was space. But it was the first child from the next generation. I'm the oldest, my dad's the oldest. It was insane, but also very loving and caring, the amount of
But I guess, like you say, if there's too much space,
right,
then you might turn around and say, where the hell was everyone?
Exactly. So it's a balancing act. I think what I learned, and just obviously this difficult pandemic that we're going through, that you need to give them at least a few days, if not a few weeks, before you reach out to them. Because at first, we had so many people coming round. We had men in my house and we had the women next door. It was that many people. We couldn't contain them in one house. And obviously, by turning up and showing representation is very important, because, you care. But being there from minute one isn't actually healthy. And look, as a Muslim, we believe, and, alhamdulillah, as time has gone on, I accept this, that I was getting told every 2 minutes, don't worry, your son, on the day of judgment, he will request to come and open the doors of heaven. And as much as it's true, at the time, I was like,
you don't want to hear this.
I just buried my son, give me a break. So it's a balancing act, I suppose.
I thought I'd ask the question because it's one of those things where you don't know, and like you said, with the pandemic, I know so many people that have had loved ones who have been in hospital, and even like family members, to the point where I want to reach out, but I'm like, this guy's already dealing with having someone in the hospital. They're dealing with having to support them and their and the wife, husband, kids, whatever. But then it's also like you want to be there for them. But you don't want to overburden them. It's a very, as you say, it's a...
And what I just recently, somebody passed away, and I just messaged the son and I said, look, you're in my prayers. If you need anything, I'm just a phone call away, and I'm going to reach out to you in a few weeks when you've had some time. So it's kind of like, look, I haven't forgotten about you, and I've kind of reached out. But you come to me when you're ready, and if you don't, it's not a problem, but I'll check in after a few weeks. And that's kind of my experience, what it's taught me, because, if you completely forget, then they think like,
where were you?
Where were you? So you can never get it right. But it's a really, very powerful question. And
I realized I interrupted you. You were talking about kind of the progression going back into work and the mindset. So what basically happened from there?
So I kind of joined Islamic Finance, which was being launched new at the bank, which generally a big bank like HSBC, you don't get new products that come in. They can be reinvented or slightly, kind of improved, but nothing new. So I got really busy with that, and after a few years, on a personal front, my wife and I were thinking of maybe trying for another child. And, we were cautious naturally for a few years. And then we thought, alhamdulillah, we have faith, and, we believe that as long as we go with the best of intentions, then, inshallah, God will do what's best for us. And we obviously did a lot of the tests beforehand of what Rihan Abbas had gone through. And we were blessed with a beautiful daughter, Nika Zara, And she was born perfectly fine. And we did, even after she was born, we did further tests.
All the tests.
To make sure that, nothing's going to come back on us. And, some things you could pick up, some things, with time you realize. And strange, after about 3.5 months, she got this really high temperature. And we thought, it's a bit of a cold, whatever, this, that, usual kind of, Nurofen or whatever they give the kids. And it wouldn't go down. And we went to our local hospital. And when we were driving there, at the back of my mind, I was like, God, please, this ain't happening again. I was having conversation with God. I was like, give me anything, but please, God, just don't test me through our door. And they were confused, baffled, like, what is this? Ended up at Great Ormond Street Hospital. But the good thing was that at the time, she had something called hypophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis. HLH is what's known for short. It's a very rare disease. And they said, but the good thing is that, we can get a transplant done. And, she should be fine. And they said, we need to put a number of Hickman lines into her body. And I was like, okay, so usually you think there's just like, one kind of line that goes in, like you put a drip or whatever.
Like an IV thing, yeah.
IV thing. But they actually instilled 6 tubes permanently into her rib cage. And I just her going through that process was like, this is just too painful. Like for anyone who's a parent, that when you see your child go through pain, you just think, look, God, just give it to me.
Give it to me,
right?
And let them be okay.
That's just a natural parent process.
Yeah.
And but again, it was like she's gonna have chemo, and it's gonna be hard at first, but we're gonna get a transplant done, and a bone marrow transplant, and she'll be fine. And again, my wife stayed there for about 3.5 months, and I was going every day to Great Ormond Street Hospital, and I was, having these conversations with consultants. So even though at the time the process was different, where Rehan Abbas was like, he's not going to live for more than 2 years, Anika Zara is going to live. We just need to get the transplant. Doing that process again was weird because the outcome is going to be different, but I'm doing the same thing. And again, I was coming home telling my parents everything will be fine because they're going to have a transplant, whatever. And with so much chemo going on, she really, her parents changed badly to the extent that I got worried that, look, is there too much chemo going in? And they said, no, it's fine, whatever. And then a few nights before she was having her transplant, we were advised to stay at the hospital just because anything can happen. And we got a call, I think, 3 o'clock in the morning to come down to ICU. And I said, what's up? They said, well, just come and we'll explain. And they said that she had caught an infection a few hours, and the infection's not going away, and we're trying to fight with it. And it seems like her body is not fighting this infection. And they said that we can give you a few moments, but we're going to have to switch off the oscillator. And I said, what do you mean switch off? They said the infection has spread and she's practically not going to be alive in the next few hours. And Salim, I think for me, I went numb. I kind of I think even talking about it today, I feel like there's some things that are coming through that I didn't even like reflect upon before. But, I kind of sat my wife down, I gave her a glass of water, and then I rang home, and then my father came, and my brother and my brother-in-law. And Anika was way harder because I actually saw my daughter's complexion change, and practically from being a kind of light brown to a pale white, literally like a ghost. And her body weight just drop. So I could feel as she was passing away, the weight of her body, like a dead body. And so that was way harder for me, way harder for any parent to witness your child passing away. And yeah, so I was in the process of preparing to bury my second child within sort of like 3 years.
I mean, what do you even think at a time like that? Like you've been through the process once,
yeah,
and then like you said, it's different the second time around. So you think, okay, we're gonna pull through.
Yeah,
but then like how?
I found Anika Zara's death way harder, and there were times I thought I'm just gonna disappear for a while, and but I still had enough strength to know that as a father, I need to bury my daughter as a duty as a Muslim, and the burying, it may sound surreal, but the burying part was not as hard because I've already been through the process, but just remembering how Anika Zara passed away, being there, was something that was going round and round in my mind. And again, I think with Rehan, I embraced his death a lot more. With Anika Zara, I became just like this autopilot,
I guess what happens to you as yourself and your wife as parents, to two children that have now passed away. Like how, like I can only imagine you're kind of like almost shells of your former selves, just going through the motions of life at that point.
Yeah, for sure. I thought there was nothing worth more to kind of live for, right? I mean, we've just had our second child, and you never want to go through your whole life ever thinking that you're going to be burying a child of yours. And here I am burying my second one. And I'll be honest, Salim, I didn't know where I was going after that. I had no idea what my direction, my purpose, do I just,
I don't even know what to ask.
Yeah,
like
right.
It's that point in the kind of story where it's like, well, this is it now.
Yeah. And I think, look, one thing I have to raise here and address is that I was very, very blessed to have a united, loving family. And I think, funnily enough, I was just, mentioning to Hasib earlier on the fact that how when you have don't get me wrong, not every day is rosy and it's not, happy-go-lucky. But if you have a strong ties with your family members, you'd be surprised when you least expect them to be there for you or expect them to be there for you, they will be that rescue savior for you. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but
in what way?
Yeah, so like obviously you may have if you have a brother or a sister or your parents, the least you kind of expect from that person who may be the savior for you from your family actually is the savior for you. But you can only have that if your ties are healthy with them. So you may think that, for example, my dad didn't know how I was growing up, so he won't know about this situation, and you think your friend would come to the rescue to give you the solution, but actually your father will be the one. And I only realized that after burying our second child, that how each person in my family, be it if my father and mother had lost a child, be it that my wife had carried those two children, and I will never know that bond of giving birth to a child, be it that my brother has seen something in me that or needs to kind of give me that guidance, that all these different people in their own way, if you have that relationship, will support you. And so where I was completely lost and didn't know where I was going, subconsciously, these people were helping me. And it wasn't like I was saying, help me, please, even though I did need help, because we just don't do that. But because they were around, it kind of helped me just have a little bit of hope again.
I guess the next question is at that point when you've been through so much tragedy and your life has basically fallen apart around you, how did you pick yourself back up and put the pieces back together? What works? So you mentioned your family and that support,
Right.
But I can imagine looking back, you can kind of see a trajectory of the events or the motions or the things that got put into motion that kind of helped you heal and grow from it.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, that's a very, very, very good question, because there's no kind of right or wrong way to go with regards to direction. But I do remember this, that every single day of my life, Salim, I say to myself, no matter what you do, regardless of the outcome, it can't be as hard as bearing a child. That's my benchmark.
So it's a very high benchmark, to be fair.
Right. But I do that because I'm thinking nothing else is going to affect me as bad
like that.
Like that. So try your best, and whatever is meant to happen is meant to happen. And so in a weird kind of way, I was trying to find something that I can escape from everything. And I, being Pakistani Punjabi, we never like to do things easy, right? We go and find the most difficult thing ever. Well, for those Pakistani Punjabi people out there, they'll know, right? And I remember that I hated cross country, and that's what it used to be called in nowadays. I don't know what they call it now, but
pre-partition days, right?
What's that?
I said pre-partition days in India. I know, yeah.
Whatever. And so I decided that I'm going to try and just run. And it wouldn't be no more than 15, 20 minutes.
Sorry, so I just want to understand that initial impetus to go out and run. What was that trigger? What made you think, oh yeah,
I need to do something for myself. I need to escape in my thoughts. I need to vent it out somehow. I don't want to talk to anyone about it. I don't want to share my emotions. Go and run. It sounds so stupid, right? But for me, it was my moment that I can talk to myself by doing something. I could have just sat in a park and reflected upon it, right? But I was like, no, go do something that's going to really push.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I didn't know where it was going to lead to, what's going to come out of it. So the two things I did was I started doing the odd run. And the second thing I wanted to do was that I wanted to reach out to Great Ormond Street Hospital, because I was so overwhelmed with how they looked after both our children. Because even Rehan Abbas, he went there for a few days. I missed a bit out. He aspirated milk in his lungs, and he went to ICU to Great Ormond Street Hospital, and he wasn't meant to survive, and he survived. So he had some treatment there, and Anika stayed 3-4 months. And I was so taken back, mainly by the nurses, of how they treated children, that I said, I want to do something for them. And they were like, yeah, Hasnain, thank you, we'd love any support. You fancy doing a marathon? And I was like, you got anything else? And they're like, well, we have, but usually they're quite popular, and it's one of those things on your bucket list, and everybody wants to do it. And coincidentally enough, I'd gone for a few runs.
Oh, so you didn't start running after that?
No.
Okay.
The running was just for me, just to talk to God or wherever it is, just away from my family, away from everyone, and just have that moment. And when I went to Great Ormond Street Hospital and they said this, I kind of thought, oh, all right, maybe this is the direction I need to go. And I signed up to do a marathon
for your kids. As in for the hospispital, but in honor of your kids.
The first actually one I did for spinal muscular dystrophy, which is the illness that our son had. And I remember I didn't know how to prepare for a marathon. Asians don't generally do things properly, right? So I just started to kind of build some momentum, and a few of my family members were like, yo, don't be stupid. What are you going to run 26.2 miles? You can't, because generally we're not very good in sort of believing that we could do something, right?
Yeah.
So and it wasn't like they were mocking me. It was just that you're wasting your time. And yeah, that's I suppose how running kind of began. And
I wanted to ask on the kind of spiritual side, like you mentioned the conversation you had with God at one point, but where so after all of this, as you're starting to run, and you said it's good, a good time to clear your head, to converse with God, whatever. where was your trajectory like from there? Like, because I think what I'm trying to understand, because look, like, just to take a step back, I've met you after all of this has happened in your life. You do not come across as somebody, I know it sounds like a weird thing to say, but you've got your stuff together. Like, you're not a mess in that sense. You're a bubbly guy, you're always laughing, always jolly, very helpful, good at your role at your previous job, because you said relationship managers, and that kind of always comes across. But I don't think people would believe that you've kind of been through everything that you've just mentioned.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to also understand, like, in terms of how that process of rebuilding yourself almost after all of this, from a kind of religious, spiritual perspective, where did it go from that conversation that you mentioned with God? Where did you then kind of go?
Yeah. You honestly think I'm a bubbly guy? You haven't seen me on a football pitch.
I'm being nice. I'm being nice for the sake of the podcast.
Wait till you see me on a football pitch, Salim. But no, look, I think the first thing I realised is, just to answer the second part of some of the things you mentioned, is the reason I try to be upbeat, positive, pleasant, respectful, not why me, play the violin, and rightly so, I could, considering what I've been through, is I realised that this is my test. This is my journey. If I was to say to you, Salim, we swap the roles and, you talk to me for half an hour about your biggest challenges and your adversities, no doubt some of that would be like eye-opening for me as well. And no doubt anyone else. Everyone, every single day has a battle. So I make it my purpose in life not to throw my battles and my adversity on someone else. That's the first thing. The second thing is that your life is very short and limited. How do you want to be remembered? You may meet somebody just on a one-off occasion and never meet them again. I'm not telling them they got to ask for my autograph, but fundamentally, what would be nice is that if I could be pleasant, respectful, and leave just an impression that he's a fairly decent guy, he seems nice, then alhamdulillah, I think that, that's good enough for me. So that's the second part. The first part is, the more I started running, Salim, we obviously pray 5 times a day to remember God, and we need the prayers. God doesn't need it. He's like, it's your choice, right? Do what you want. But I think we can also remember God and have these spiritual connections in different ways. What we say, how we speak, the words we use, the mannerisms. It's funny because I always say that my father came from a very hard-working manual labor family, and my mother came from a very affluent, educated family. I learnt the tough love from my father, and I learnt the mannerisms and all of the other good things and important things from my mother's side. So I look at them too. I think, how the hell did you get married? But you know what? As a formula, that worked really well for me, because I think you need a bit of both. So when it came to the spiritual side and connecting with God, the more I ran, the more I was talking to God. So what that allowed me was to have more opportunities to discover and what's important to me, what's important to God, and how I can please God. Do I make mistakes every day? Absolutely. Am I perfect? Far from it. Do I have tough days? You name it, more than anyone. But you always have to leave the right impression, not just in front of people, but with God as well. So when I used to run, and the harder the runs became, I would always say, God, you've given me the strength to bury my 2 children. Forget 26.2 miles. I'll double that and see how far you can take me. So it was like I could see myself moving on and not overcoming, because that stays with you every day. Yeah. I tell my, Hania Fatima and Hashim Abbas, I tell them that you have a brother and sister. There's 4 of you. They're alive. They're in our lives every single day. But you learn to move on. And it's weird because, literally I had to take a step and from a step became a jog, from a jog it became a long distance run.
Yeah.
But I metaphorically used that as, this is how I'm going to move on.
You know, we were discussing before we started recording the podcast. We're talking about running because I've started running as well.
Good.
And I think there's this very interesting thing that when you said the same thing, that, you know, after, for me, post 5 kilometers is when you get into that. You might call it a spiritual zone. For me, it's just autopilot. I'll be honest. Like, right, I'm not. I don't have conversations with God at that point, but it works for you. So sure. Good on you.
Yeah,
but there's this kind of very weird experience that your body goes through when you're running, especially, you know, distance, where you kind of get into a new headspace, something that you can't achieve. Like you said, you can sit in a park and ponder. And I'm sure, you know, meditation. There are yoga masters out there that will swear by that stuff, and I'm sure you go deep end there, you can achieve that. Of course. But the layman version is just running,
right?
And it's got this this thing to it. And like you said, outside, you were saying that when someone else is a runner or runs regularly, you don't need to explain what's so amazing about it. Right. It's just a thing. Yeah. But I think, you know, for you, and I guess for people listening to this as well, one of the things I wanted for people to be able to take away, like you said, everyone's got their own relative struggles. Losing a child is definitely up there. Losing 2 children is pretty much at the top of the list, I would say. But dealing with and overcoming, and I think that's what's, you know, like I said, everything that you are now, that I see and I've known for the last few years, it's amazing to see this person because of everything that you've been through. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I wanted to get you on, and why I wanted to have this conversation, is because I feel like when people are experiencing tragedy, and like you mentioned with the pandemic, you know, people have lost loved ones at all stages of life. Yeah. And it's been difficult in so many different ways, but that process of rebuilding and growing as a person out of adversity is something that's not easy.
No, Salim, it's not, and you know, you've covered some really key points there. That again, every individual is different, and their experiences are different. And fundamentally, I think if I was to home into some kind of, you know, it's not a magic wand, but you know, certain strategies that have helped me is. I remember reading once where somebody said, too many people would love to have your bad day. So where you think that, you know, today has been like just a day you want to forget and ignore, you put that to somebody on the other side of the world and they'll take it every single day. So perspective. I think perspective is very important. We always, especially in the world we live in now with social media and, you know, kind of the imagery of what is happiness and what is success. These are all defined depending on every individual's interpretation. You know, one person's success could be, you know, just having a healthy child and a healthy marriage. Another person's success could be losing 3 stones, you know, and you know. So I think what's important is that you have to identify that what is going to make you happy, not what is going to, you know, give the perception that you're happy to others. That's the first thing. The next thing is that, look, there are so many blessings in our lives. Every single day we have so many blessings in our life, but we always go the other direction. But you know, what if I just had that, or I need a little bit more of that? Mate, just focus on what you've got, because honestly, there's so many people who don't even have that. So again, this is how I function.
Do you feel like the experiences that you've had in life have given you that continual perspective? Because like you mentioned, you don't overcome the death of your children. You learn to process it. Right. But do you feel like it's given you that constant perspective in life? That
Look, I don't know if this is going to sound crazy to people listening, but my children passing away has been, in some ways, and I'll come on to why, blessings for me, because as a Muslim, we believe that this life is just the first chapter. The true life begins hereafter. Mm-hmm. So if I've got, you know, call it a golden ticket, and I've got 2, Rihan Abbas and Nika Zara are my golden tickets. and it's again, one of the other things I was going to come to is belief. If you truly believe in your faith, then you have to accept that this is a 2-part journey. And if the second part journey, I've got 2 lottery tickets waiting to grab me, who's in a better place? Yeah. But saying that can be like...
That sounds a bit, yeah.
Right? Because so you're saying you've lost 2 children.
But it's, as you said, it's all about perspective.
It's all about perspective. And that's my belief. And to anyone, even if you don't believe in God, but if you have a belief in something to keep you going, you want to lose weight, you've got to have a belief that you're going to do it. You want to, play for Tottenham Hotspur and be a great footballer.
No one wants to play for Tottenham Hotspur.
You're going to improve, right?
Let's get that clear, man. Come on.
So, you know what I mean? It's a question of faith and having that desire to believe that I truly, truly believe. Because if I hadn't, maybe I wouldn't be here today.
And you mentioned a little bit earlier that you've had 2 children since then, and you said that for yourself that you tell them that there's 4. Your next child, your 3rd child, what was that like? I can't imagine going through from day one. Yeah, because it's happened twice now at this point. Yeah. Like, what were you guys thinking? Yeah. And also how. You mentioned you were spoiled. That's right. I'm assuming that your kids are super spoiled.
Well, you know what? I'm actually meant to be the disciplinarian uncle in my house. Okay. For my sister's children. And so that was interesting because when Hania Fatima was born, the first few months I was always being a little bit cautious and I was overjoyed. But I was like, just... pray God.
Don't get too excited. Don't get your hopes up, kind of thing.
And I'd always kind of play it cool in front of everyone else, but deep down I was worried. And then as time went on and we got some further tests done, she's been perfectly fine. Hania Fatima is now 7 years old, and she is spoiled. I won't deny it. And not so much from me; it's from
everyone.
Everyone. Imagine, funny enough, my younger sister, I see similar traits in her, Hania with Nida, and it's I think Nida spoils her the most because I think it brings her childhood through. But it was. Salim, man, like just talking about it even now,
I can see you like light up.
I just feel so like God has been again it's perspective. I've thanked God, and I try to thank God every single day that you've allowed us to still have the opportunity to have this child. And we again, my wife was like, maybe we should try again, and I was like listen, allow it, right? We got one healthy child.
Let's not push it.
It was difficult, but then by then I'd kind of run a few. Kind of marathons. I became an ambassador for Great Ormond Street Hospital for the work that I was doing there, and I was in a good place. So again, it's about belief, right? Like just go for it. Allah wills. And Hashim Abbas was born Christmas Day 4 years ago now. I remember because the hospital was empty. Nobody was there, and I think a lot of obviously. Women were holding back to celebrate Christmas and try and deliver the children just before, just after. So we had no hassle those few days. And funnily enough, that the nurse who brought him into this world, we've become very good friends with her. And
oh really?
Yeah. So I always send her pictures of your son's just turned 4 years old. Whatever.
That's nice.
So from having no children to having 2 healthy children, again it was like there's millions of people out there who don't get the opportunity to become a parent. There's many women who have so many cycles of IVF and try and spend hundreds of thousands of pounds to try and experience being a parent, and they haven't. And we have been able to have this twice. So again, rather than thinking, why have we lost 2 children? I'm trying to hold on to the positive side that we have been blessed with 2 children.
That's amazing, man. And you very quickly brushed over the fact that you've run multiple marathons, but nicely slid in there. But you've done what, 6, 7 marathons now?
I've done 6, and I wouldn't say I was running in those marathons, to be honest. But
walking.
Yeah, crawling at sometimes. But it was. It became another part of the journey of giving back, and working at Great Ormond Street Hospital as an ambassador allowed me to go around the country. And I remember doing a presentation to 100 parents who had lost children, and they had just lost one child. And I kind of felt drawn. We started doing a lot this charity cricket match every year in our local community, just because obviously, we love all the, Asians love playing cricket and get some free food or whatever. And I started doing a lot of this kind of charity side of work voluntarily, just because it felt right. It felt good. It felt like I was giving back. And also it allowed me to kind of remember my children. And that's sort of where I kind of began doing some charity work.
You're great at transitions. I was going to transition to like kind of complete the circle, because we started by talking about Hasnain. How many, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago?
Yeah, 15 years ago.
To now, you're kind of working in the charity sector. You don't size people up anymore. I would like to think.
Far from it.
But so I guess, from like a career perspective and your outlook in life and your priorities, because you spoke about your shifting priorities early on.
Yeah.
Right now, as a sort of snapshot of yourself today.
Yeah.
What are the priorities? How do you see life and work as well?
Yeah, so not many people can say they've worked in the corporate. I even worked in the educational sector for a little while, and now in the third sector. Not many people can say they've been able to transfer their skills in 2 sectors, let alone 3.
Yeah.
And, I've been fortunate enough to do that. I just want to mention that one of my cousins, Syed Jaffrey, he was a very successful banker. We all happened to be in Canary Wharf at the same time. It was by default. We never kind of planned it. And there was 4 or 5 of us working for different banks.
Must have been a lot of expensive lunches.
Yeah, I generally tried to just wing it and say I forgot my card.
Yeah. Next week's on me.
That's right, exactly. And he, at the age of 32, he became a very successful investment banker. And he got a brain tumor, and he passed away, unfortunately. But during the period when he was at Harley Street, he kind of started to, again, when you're close to death or thinking that, my days are numbered, that you reflect on things that are important. And so just to, again, say, because I've been through it, that's my reminder every day. We're all going to go there one day, right? So how are you going to maximize the time that you've got here? And he was working with a number of kids at this place called John Kelly Boys, which is now called Crest Academy in Wembley.
Yeah.
And he was working through another charity, and he went there, and he kind of realized these kids, like 3 months before GCSEs, are like just, kicking ball around and don't care. So through his own money, he started to help these kids and say, look, we've got to make sure that you're prepared for your GCSE exams, because potentially leads, he called it 1 degree. It was a great concept, because he believed a slight change of angle today brings you a better tomorrow. And that's why I called it 1 degree. And the reason I want to share his story, because he was also part of the reason why I kind of wanted to give back, because he passed away and it was kind of left on my shoulders to drive this initiative, this intervention. And I didn't know what to do with these kids. I was walking to the weekends to these kids. These are 14, 15-year-olds. And I was like, I've never taught kids, but I was there to kind of apparently motivate them, inspire them. And all I thought was, okay, my dad, he was raw with me, so I'm going to go raw with these kids. I was just, literally, I'd probably get kicked out of academy if they told me what I was doing. But I went in hard. And, we took on 40 kids. And in the first year, I think 39 of them went from a failing grade to a passing grade and went into further education.
That's amazing.
And it was brought down to time, love, give them the belief, perception, willpower, all these things that we daily should have. They suddenly had further opportunities to work and go into further education. One story that stood out for me, one parent said to me that, "Oh, Hasnain, you've saved my child's life." And I'm like, he's only going to further education. I'm not sure I've saved his life, but she said he was selling guns on the streets. Guns. So you don't realize that, just by giving some guidance and inspiration to these children, that what they're doing on the side and how it can change their direction. So working with these kids was part of this kind of charity and giving back. And I was fortunate enough to kind of, and I still keep in touch with some of those students now. They're married, they've got kids and they're in a much better place. And, I feel so proud to know that, you made that choice, but I was there to kind of just, direct you a little bit. And so, I got reached out to my ex-bank boss in the bank. He knew somebody at Islamic Relief, and I was approached, and to be honest, I had my interview and I thought I did well, but I didn't think that I would be the strongest candidate because I didn't necessarily come from a charity background. And, lo and behold, I got the job. And, it's been an incredible experience for me. My day-to-day life, working for, the largest Muslim charity in the world is amazing because they're all over the world, taking donors to see what their money has done. And that sort of face-to-face, that look when you see the impact that it's made of the work is unbelievable.
So you were able to, like you said, that same role of like relationship management, which you were doing in the corporate field,
right?
You've kind of been able to take that over and work in that space in the charity sector.
Yeah, it's RM role fundamentally, and it's weird because I think how the hell has that happened? Before a guy would say, a person would say to me, like, how much money are you going to make me, right? That's why I'm putting my money into your bank. But now these donors are like, look, we want to feel empowered. We want to feel inspired. We want to feel that, I feel fulfilled with my donation. And it's our duty. It's our duty to be able to show that and reward that feeling for them. So I've been fortunate to go to Ethiopia with some donors and just experiencing what their money has done and getting to know them as well is unbelievable. It's so fulfilling for me.
Do you feel like with everything that's happened and having overcome all of the tragedy and everything else, do you feel like you've been given a second chance at life?
Yeah, second or third chance, Salim, the way I see it, with two children, because I could have lost myself in any of those two. And yeah, for sure, definitely I feel I've been given this opportunity. And for those parents who have lost children, the only thing I would say is that honestly, if you truly have faith and you have some form of belief that your kids will never be able to come back and you can never replace them, but you can remember them and embrace them. One thing, when Syed Jafri passed away, we did a eulogy, and I remember that we went to this fancy building near Westminster, and we sat there and we were celebrating his life. And I was kind of scratching my head a bit because I was like, we don't do that. We don't celebrate people who passed away, not in the Asian culture. We tend to wail and mourn and have this misery on our shoulders for the rest of our life. Yeah. I'm not saying that, you can't do that or you shouldn't do that. But, if I would actually like to remember my kids in a good way. I remember Rehan Abbas's beautiful blue eyes. I remember Anika Zara's wonderful smile. I remember when Anika Zara would start giggling every time she saw this duck that we would squeak. I remember Rehan Abbas' eyes would lit when he watched Finding Nemo. I think that would help me personally. And I would say to those parents that, what, just by remembering them in a positive way could maybe help you in some way.
Thank you, man. I mean, I genuinely appreciate, and I say this to everyone that comes on the podcast, especially when it's a personal story, but I appreciate you opening up and sharing so much. I know it can never be easy, obviously, talking about the things that you have, but the reason I really wanted to have this particular conversation is because I know, as I said, I've mentioned it a few times already, but I know what you've been through, and seeing yourself, the way, as you said, the way you carry yourself. I'm not going to be this nice to you ever again, by the way, so just take it in. The way you carry yourself, that your demeanor with people, as I said, like you wouldn't think for a second that you've experienced these kinds of things, and it gives me, and I hope others, kind of hope that tragedy does affect all of us at some point in our lives. Unfortunately, everyone around us is going to die at some point. Before or after us, we don't know, but we're all here for a very temporary amount of time. But that there is a sort of a roadmap back, and as I said, it's not that you've just kind of learned to deal with the pain, but I feel like you've almost thrived and flourished, having been through these experiences. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hope so, Salim. I hope so.
But no, thank you, man. Thank you for coming in.
No, you're very welcome. And once again, thank you for inviting me. Much appreciated.